Welcome, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the journey of Mars through the sign of Taurus, which begins on the 9th of June and goes on through to the 20th of July when he moves into Gemini. Now, we've had Uranus in the sign of Taurus full time since March 2019, so when Mars catches up with Uranus, that's going to be a key part of this journey. But as it begins, it's also clashing in an incredibly powerful way with its co-ruler of the sign of Scorpio, Pluto in Aquarius. I'm going to go through all of this with you. I'm going to share the event chart for when Mars enters Taurus, which shows, based on Placidus, it being in the 11th house, which very much about the collective. I'm going to go through the themes of Mars in Taurus and also those upcoming aspects, and then I'm going to share each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, from which you can get a flavour of what to expect over this 6 weeks passage. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining us. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions are truly appreciated. Thank you so much. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, as I've been sharing, around about 50% of people who watch my videos are not subscribers. Please help the channel to grow by clicking that subscription button, but also the bell notification symbol. Now, the big part of my role is working with people one-to-one. I am a consulting astrologer. Please see the link below and you can check out my testimonials, how people have found working with me. I don't edit these. As they come in, I share as is. Also, if you'd like to get your free written daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, please see the link below to click for that. That enables you to see what's going on for your ascendant, your sun or your moon. But I also share the overarching astrological influence for each day. So it helps us to get the big picture and also our more personal insight. Also, if you're a patron, you can download a Mars factoid by going to Patreon. If you are a patron, thank you so much for all your support. I'm going to be sharing a lot more through Patreon, particularly with my wife Alyssa, and look out for those updates. But if you would like to become a patron, you can do so from $3 a month. And finally, if you'd like to ascend above zodiac astrology and understand the brilliance of natal astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, I can produce for you your birth charts. These will give you a huge amount of information at great value. If you know your natal tropical astrology, check out your draconic, your soul karmic astrology. Both packages have 30% off. Please see the link below for more. So Mars, let's just think about the archetypes of Mars. It of course rules 2 zodiac signs of Aries, where it's been for the last 6 weeks, but also the sign of Scorpio, and it's the co-ruler of that sign along with the aforementioned Pluto. So they're clashing as this event crystallizes. The exact square will be on the 11th of June. But let's just think about Mars in terms of its energy. Through Aries, it can be about initiation. It can be about action, instinct, drive, passion. Certainly can be the warrior planet, but also it gets things going. So something we've got going over the last 6 weeks with Mars's help, we can now see how far that process has come and look to get it more rooted, more established, because the sign of Taurus is about foundations. It can of course be about money, but it's also about our self-worth, our values, can be about food, agriculture, farming. All of those are going to be in the news in a big way over this next 6 week period. But for us personally, I feel that what Mars does in a way is slows down, even if it's moving, slows down that more impulsive energy that comes through Aries and is looking for some kind of tangible outcome, because the sign of Taurus is earth. and that wants to see some kind of practical evidence of progress. But Mars moving through Taurus can see us more focused on stability and security, and therefore everyday finance, and turning those good ideas into something that's more durable and more long lasting can be part of that process. Or we can use the desire and the passion of Mars in terms of our romantic situation, and that can see us being more mindful of Mars's rulership of Scorpio, where it's about gratification through the sign of Aries, perhaps instant gratification, through Scorpio more sensual, it's deeper, it's more to do with possession and investment, and it's a very, very psychological influence in some ways. But that energy in Taurus is of course governed by the rulership of Venus, which in itself can be about desire. So Mars gives us some ideas in that regard, but it can also give us great endurance and ability to really persevere at things that maybe we have been starting out upon. Now, generally, Mars in Taurus can be slower to anger, but because of the right angle to Pluto, and I'm showing on the screen now the event chart. This is based on universal time. It is located on Greenwich, but that's because of the prime meridian, and you can see that Mars is in the 11th house, which is very much to do with how we all connect together, and it can be about sociability. So if we're thinking about the 11th house, our connections to others, our friendships are really going to be important. But it's also possible that as much as we can get together and do things collectively, which could be great fun and very uplifting, that may also be the area where there could be disputes, because of course Mars can be about anger. And so because of the square with Pluto, which you can see is at 1 degree and 47 in Aquarius, and ironically in the 8th house, so Mars for its rulership of Scorpio, house 8, and of course the 11th house very Aquarius-like. So we've got a clash there, and I think it's possible over this next 6 weeks, because this event chart provides a backdrop for that 6 weeks, that we could find ourselves becoming much more conscious of who shares our values and who doesn't. When Mars and Pluto are in a square, it can be about power, and that power can be expressed, obviously, in a very constructive way, or it can be more negative. But certainly that right angle will give us even more endurance, I feel. But of course what we need to be mindful of is that we could encounter someone who wants to impose their ideology or their beliefs, which is a very 11th house energy, on us, and perhaps it could be around a close relationship. So if a relationship is at that point in its cycle where you're thinking a lot about whether it is for the long term or not, having Pluto in the 8th house can of course be what makes way, what doesn't last. So that's really interesting. But I think when we do think about our money with Mars in Taurus, we need to at the same time retain a little bit of nobility if we can, with Mars being in house 11. But I also want to make you aware of the position of the path of fortune, because we've essentially got a T-square that's headed up by Mars between Pluto and the path of fortune in Leo, and that's in house 2, everyday money, that Tauran feel. So we've got some very interesting energies going on here as this event begins. We can all want to improve our finances after the battering collectively that's gone on over the last few years. We need to do that in a constructive way. We need to think about the long term, Pluto, but we also need to think about how we're connected to one another. And we also need to think about resources, which of course is very, very Taurian. So Mars can give us a desire to consume, but we need to consume with a degree of mindfulness. That's how I'm seeing this. Now we also have on the 5th of July a great link between Mars and Saturn. So we get a good balance between the thrust of Mars and the more structural energies of Saturn. But from the 11th through to the 20th of July, that's when Mars meets up with Uranus. The exact conjunction is the 15th. And I think that's going to be a very interesting transition. if we think about the energy of Uranus in Taurus, it's not been easy. We've seen a huge amount of disruption in recent years and a lot of unpredictability, particularly about resources. You know, whether it is the cost of food, Taurus, the use of cash, Taurus, whether the rate of inflation, Taurus, can be to do with things that we quarry out of the ground, so oil and coal and gas, very Taurian in a way. All of those things have shown great volatility over the last few years. But I feel that with Mars applying to Uranus, what we're going to see on the 15th is some kind of outcomes for a lot of that disruption that has occurred. It's going to be really interesting how it plays out in each of our personal situations. However, we do have a very gentle link that also features on the 20th between Mars and Neptune. And if there's an opportunity to use our funds, our generosity, our thoughtfulness, our actions to help another person, that's a great place and time to do it. I'm now going to go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect over this next 6 weeks. Firstly, Aries. Well, of course, Mars is your ruler. It also rules the first house in astrology. So if we think about Mars moving into your second house, it's particularly true for you that the things you've been focusing on, perhaps with the help of the total solar eclipse in your sign. So whatever it is, whether it's a new interest, a new hobby that you've taken up, something that you're creating, a business involvement, or even an attraction to someone in a romantic context, whatever has really been exciting you over the last 6 weeks, you have an opportunity to really enjoy it a lot more. And it's great to enjoy things. Life isn't all about slog. It is about getting a reward. So if you have adhered to a diet in recent months, you may find that being tested over this next 6 weeks, because Mars, of course, desire, the second house, can be those calorific goodies. Taurus, because of its Venus and sensual rulership, certainly can give us an appreciation of good food and so forth. But also maybe you're going to want to spend some money on clothes, or perhaps on your garden space. Obviously, the Taurian energy, very much to do with the earth. But if there is someone that you're strongly drawn towards, I feel that it can get much hotter in terms of the intimacy if you have been forging a close relationship. But in an ongoing tie, I feel the fact that Mars does clash with Pluto right at the start of this process does suggest that if you want different things, this needs to be an urgent conversation in order to create some clarity. Taurus, Mars moving into your sign is a great development, because Mars moving through house 12 is one of the trickiest transits of all. And if your emotions have been up and down over that last period of time, maybe at moments you felt really on edge, and things that ordinarily wouldn't affect you have felt quite triggering. At other times, maybe you felt very much more emotional. Mars moving into your own sign is going to give you a much greater sense of certainty. Your physical vitality will be up. Some of the anxieties that have been manifesting themselves will just fade away. And that ability to influence things in the here and now is going to be strengthened. But of course, with Mars in your sign clashing with Pluto in your 10th house, if you're seeing something around your professional situation very differently to someone you have been working with or who you want to work with, that can create some conflicts. You have to be conscious of that. But also your sign is very much to do with continuity, and Mars can push us to change things. And when it comes into that conjunction, from the 11th to the 20th, and precisely on the 15th with Uranus, this is going to give you a real insight into just how far you've come in redefining your individuality since Uranus moved full-time into your sign in March 2019. And you could really push back if anyone tries to quell your independence or the unique qualities that you've been developing, or the voice that you've found. You're going to be quite strident, even militant, and certainly at that time it's a good opportunity for you to do something more escapist, more daring, push yourself out of your comfort zone. So Gemini, Mars moving into Taurus for you is somewhat complex, because as this process begins, both the Sun and Venus in your sign are being challenged by Saturn. Saturn's in the part of your situation to do with your connection to the world. And the collective in Gemini at this current time is very much about your individuality. But along comes Mars into the 12th house, and it could put you in a little bit of a spin, because suddenly with Saturn applying to both the Sun and Venus, whereas you've had this great sense of momentum at the start of June, now it can feel like you've hit a real wall of very hot, dead air, and things aren't quite moving in the way you would like. Maybe your desire to manifest your ideas and individuality has been met with some resistance by people who you would have thought or hoped could have been more open to what you have to offer, and that could see you lose a little bit of confidence. And with Mars moving into house 12, maybe you can start to ask yourself quite a lot of deep questions, but don't punish yourself just because you're getting some mixed messages about some of the brilliant things you're doing and the brilliant ways you are. It's just that Mars in the 12th house has a tendency to rake up old sediment in terms of our emotions that we thought we dealt with. So, whether it's a past breakup, or someone was really mean to us, or perhaps we lost someone who was very close to us, or we have encountered some kind of injustice, those energies may be much more active in your subconscious than you appreciate, because the subconscious is so powerful. And in fact, across that 11th to the 20th of July, when Mars is applying to Uranus, and exactly on the 15th, you may find yourself seeing your emotions extraordinarily close to the surface. That's not the best of times to hang out with people that you don't particularly feel at ease with. That's part of life. We can't always be interacting with close and trusted friends and associates. Sometimes we do have to expose ourselves to people who may not necessarily be our complete cup of tea. But the 12th house can be secret enemies in traditional astrology, and Mars can, of course, be an aggressive energy. So it's possible around the 15th that someone could manifest to you some kind of dislike or opposition or criticism, and you need to just prepare yourself in readiness. So when it comes to anyone that you're interacting with from now until then, just keep your guard up a little bit. Not everybody may have quite as open and a sincere agenda as you might hope. Cancer, Mars moving to the 11th house is a great antidote to the last 6-week period where it's been very strident. But ironically, it's been very strident in house 10, urging you to strut your stuff and demonstrate just how assertive and talented you can be, just when the collective in Gemini has perhaps made you much more sensitive and much more unsure, perhaps about your identity. So there has been a paradox there which hasn't been easy. Mars moving into Taurus for you personally, I think, is a great development, particularly because Venus and Mercury will move into your sign on the 17th of June. Then we have the summer solstice, the beginning of cardinal quadrant 2, the Sun returns to your sign, and that really is going to be a series of green lights for you to head forwards. But what about the clash to Pluto? Well, I think it is interesting because Pluto for you is in the 8th house, which can be shared resources. So if there is something that you're wanting to work upon, maybe around a business matter where you need to get the support of a financial institution, or it's to do with an investment or shares, pensions, legacies, all those kind of things, very much emphasized by Pluto. But the 11th house may be where you want to flex. And because the 11th house can be very future orientated, the conjunction with Mars and Uranus, which becomes exact on the 15th, could see you do something really quite different to what people might expect of you. Because You're a leader sign, you're a cardinal sign, you have a reputation of being nurturing. That comes from your rulership of the moon. But actually, no one should underestimate the power of a Cancer. You can be very, very willful and very determined. And that determination can be maxed up with this square between Mars and Pluto, but you need to make sure that you're aligned with anyone that you're working with, because with the collective still in house 12 and Saturn in house 9 emphasizing truths and the 12th house revelations that you're not expecting, this can still be a tender time as Mars moves into Taurus. But over the whole piece, I think it's going to be very, very good for you, particularly from the 17th of June, and you're going to find yourself much more wanting to connect with people, just as you're going through a period at the present time where you may be thinking or letting some people go from your inner world who to you no longer serve your greater good. Leo, Mars moving into the sign of Taurus is really exciting for you. Your natural radiance is aided by this, because Mars moving to the top of your chart, your solar chart, onto the midheaven cusp is really important. This is where we can identify our goals and ambitions, but also take some very confident and meaningful steps towards them. And Mars in the 10th house is very, very elevated. It can be how we're perceived by others in a public interactional way, but it also can be to do with where we want to use our daytime energy, if you like, because the 10th house is the sunlight of the chart. And remember, Mars also is the ruler of your third decan, sub-ruled after the Sun by Mars, because that shares through its rulership of Aries your fire triplicity. So you've got a great kinship with Mars, but what about that angle to Pluto? Well, yes, there is the potential for a real clash of worlds over the next few weeks if you see something very differently to another person. And also, the collective in Gemini at the moment has seen you wanting to see the best in people, to really bring into the open perhaps a little bit more of an idealistic approach. But the shuddering impact of Saturn over the last few days has perhaps brought a real dose of reality, particularly about money. And it may be around a long-term plan, friendship, business alliance, that there isn't quite the alignment that you hoped there would be. And what the meaning of Mars going with Pluto is that maybe you're being pushed to make a black and white decision on this situation and not hedge your bets. And this could be coming up rather more quickly than you may have liked. You will also find with from the 11th to the 20th that Uranus's push and prompt over the last 6 years or so to redefine your world role and your leadership credentials, and to be much more open-minded, because do remember that Mars and Pluto and also the part of fortune in your sign, that's all fixed energy. This is not a good time to stay fixed. Try to stay with that Gemini energy and flex. But there may be someone who sees something so starkly different to you that it almost gets into an outright dispute straight away. So should you put your ambitions and desires to one side? Absolutely not. This is why this is such a big crossroads for you. But I feel it does depend on that Uranian influence. So if your natal chart tends to be rather conservative, you may still be a little bit wary about pushing through and making a big change. If you're a much more dynamic Leo, I feel that you're going to want to take on the challenge that anyone lays down to you, because you know you've got to redefine who you are. It's part of the journey that your life's going through at the moment. It's exciting, could be challenging, but you certainly will be up for that challenge, I feel sure. So Virgo, I'm really excited to be sharing Mars's journey into your fellow Earth sign of Taurus, because if we think back since Uranus moved into Taurus, that part of you that is so adhered to doing things in a systematic, very regulated way, which is a great part of your gift, Uranus has been challenging you. Then we had the Taurus season, and they were all helping and pushing you, all those planets, to explore things and not feel that you always have to be the one that is the glue that holds everything together for everyone else. So your reliability, your conscientious, is something that you shouldn't let suffocate and pulverize your passion. So Mars moving into the ninth house, it's very dramatic, very adventurous, very independent, quite rugged. If you're someone who likes to get out in the great outdoors, wonderful. If you see yourself as more of a purveyor of knowledge, it's brilliant. If you want to download some courses, learn new skills, or you just want to go on a vacation. But this event does provide you with a little bit of an option, because Pluto has also been pushing you since the 21st of January to think about where you're very adhered. You know, the things you do, whether it's for yourself personally or in terms of your work, that give you that continuity in your situation. Pluto, in a way, has been asking you to ask yourself some very deep questions of, aren't you in some ways stopping yourself and going for something that could be more dramatic and exciting, but it may mean giving something up that has been a very reliable and comforting routine for you. So Mars clashing with Pluto brings that question right into the open once more. And it's a big question. But what you can gain, particularly when Mars applies to Uranus through the 11th to the 20th and exact on the 15th of July, if you really wanted to liberate yourself from something that really has run its course, this is the perfect time to do so. Because the other thing to remember is that with Pluto in the mix, in retrograde, in your 6th house through to the start of September, it's possible that someone else could change something that you've been very invested in without necessarily your buy-in. You know, for example, a job, a sector you work in, everything's changing in society so much. And remember, with Pluto, we can't control everything. It is always moving. So it's good to keep your options open, even if you are quite settled with what you're doing. So just think of those things, particularly with the collective in Gemini, which is really asking some serious questions about how much you're stepping into the sunlight and receiving the acclaim you truly deserve. Libra, one of the interesting things about Mars moving into your 8th house, very redolent of that scorpionic energy, is about passion. It's possible that you have been interacting with someone with Mars going through house 7 over the last 6 weeks, someone who's come into your world. And Mars going into the 8th house could see you wanting something deeper from this involvement. Or it may mean, if you're single or mainly single, that the square with Pluto could bring someone into your orbit that you find very, very hard to resist, even mesmerizing. But the strange thing about this person is they may not, in some ways, be your complete cup of tea. So it may be someone that you just are finding very compelling, but also very hard to resist. So that kind of energy is possible. But it's also possible that there could be a major clash where you feel your skills and passion and artistry and talents, Pluto in the 5th, are not really finding the financial reward that you feel they're due. And that can make you very intently determined to change that over the next 6 weeks. And that may mean working more closely with someone else, house 8, or it could mean using your longer term resources in a slightly different way. And using the energy of Uranus could mean being a bit more risk taking. It could be being innovative. It could be some kind of startup in your situation. But whatever you do with Mars in the mix, use this test to decide whether it's someone you're drawn to romantically, whether it's someone you're seeing at the current time, or whether it is around a financial matter. The test that Mars is setting you is, do you want to go all in with 100% of your will? Because if you don't, that gives you the answer to whether you should go all in or partially in to test the thing out, which would be very Libra, just see how it feels, weigh it up. But if you've got any instinct which tells you you're unsure, do listen to it. So Scorpio, over the last 6 weeks, Mars has been giving you an opportunity to use its thrust to reform some part of your life where there could have been a greater series of efficiencies or proficiencies. So maybe you've got a bit fitter, maybe you've been more mindful of your diet, maybe you've changed a job because you needed to do something that was more gratifying. But Mars moving into your 7th house is intriguing, particularly because your two rulers clash in such a very powerful way straight away. The 7th house in traditional astrology is the sector of open enemies. But I want to clarify this for you because I don't think it's necessary to be fearful. The open enemies are the people at work we don't necessarily like, but we kind of, hi, how are you? But they're not really our cup of tea, but we know they're not really for us. But it also can be someone that you may need to compete against. I feel that the 7th house is often underestimated. It's where we connect to people. So with Mars in the mix, if you feel that you've been a bit passive in a situation, it can help you to reinforce your boundary. That can be a really good thing. If there's someone that you're drawn to, it could give you the earnestness and the thrust to actually try to spark a connection. It may be in an ongoing relationship that you feel that perhaps you've been too much of a people pleaser. Now you can let people know about what you need in the equation. So there's a mixture of things you can achieve here. Also, the combative energy would be brilliant if you want to play a sport which gives you an absolute opponent. So for example, like tennis, badminton, squash, table tennis, a direct opponent. However, because your two rulers are in such a powerful celestial dust-up at the start of this process, if you are feeling a little bit raw around an emotional issue, one of the things you've got to try and perhaps avoid doing is asserting yourself more than you really need to. That old saying of taking a hammer to crack a nut comes to mind. So a good opportunity to think carefully about your connection to others and firm it up, but don't try too hard, I'd say. But then once Mars does join up with Uranus from the 11th to the 20th, if you are single, someone could come into your world very, very dramatically. Whether they'll stick around or not is another matter, but you could have a very passionate connection, and that could be around the 15th. But equally, if you're in a relationship where you're trying your best to reform and get it working as you want, if you get to that date and you're still not getting back what you need, that could be the point that you decide to press the button called escape and bail out once and for all, and you could do it quickly. So Sagittarius, Mars moving into house 6 is terrific if you want to really get yourself fitter, be more active, be more productive, and make some changes in your situation which just make your life run that much more sweetly. But Mars can be about what we need from the situation in terms of our identity, our ego, if you like. The 6th house can be where we can be more self-sacrificing, so can be where we use our energy to help others. But Mars moving into this area and its clash with Pluto almost straight away creates a frisson of energy. So you could find yourself with a surplus of energy, but how do you use it? And one of the things you shouldn't do over the next 6 weeks is try to use too much. So think of the priorities that you've got in your situation, make a little bit of a list, and focus, if you are wanting to be more virtuous, which is what the 6th house can be about, and focus on the things that are really the most important. And then the things at the bottom of that list, I really would revisit later on as Mars makes its way through the sign of Taurus, because what you're looking for in Taurus, I feel, the joint energy of house 6 and Taurus, is better value in a way, a better outcome for where you're putting energy and effort in. And you want to see things working in a very pragmatic way. But of course, you've still got a lot of energy in your sector of relating. That is challenged at the start of this week by the restrictive Saturn, and at the end of the first week of Mars being in Taurus by the energies of Neptune. So a lot of distortion around your home and emotional situation. Perhaps what you're looking for is other people to put a bit more in terms of the domestic load. So if you can share out the chores a little bit more, that would be a good starting point. And at work, if you feel that you're the person who perhaps does a lot of the slog, look to get other people to support some of the more mundane tasks that you're doing, because some of the more creative ones or the more customer facing ones is where you're going to really shine. Capricorn, it's exciting for you because Mars has moved out of a complex area, house 4, where he can be defensive and prickly, into a very exuberant, glamorous area, house 5. Can be about your love life, can certainly be about play and socialisation, can be about your kids if you've got any in terms of their pursuits. But of course Mars is about us as individuals. How can you raise your profile through your talents, your skills, and the things that you're really passionate about? But because Pluto does square up with Mars, you could find yourself a bit impulsive with resources over the next 6 weeks. And of course the 5th house can also be about chance and risk and speculation, and with Pluto in 2, you're just being reminded here not to force something. If you're really interested in something that could give you a new source of income, you really need to do your research in the way that you're famously known for, being very detailed, precise, systematic. Don't get so caught up in the impulse that you do something that later down the track you may regret. But certainly around the 15th, if you're single but you'd like to have some action around your love life, there could be a very passionate and exciting connection that could make your pulse truly race. Aquarius, Mars moving into Taurus is really interesting because, of course, Uranus has been here, your modern ruler, full time since 2019, and the spring in the north and the autumn in the southern hemisphere. And during that time, if my situation's anything to go by, as I've often shared with you, it's been very, very up and down, very changeable, lots of changes. So Mars moving here is a 6-week opportunity, a window of opportunity to actually get some of the changes that have been ongoing bedded down a little bit more, because Taurus is about those foundations. Mars is about thrust. It could be, for example, that you decide to get some contractors in to do a job, some kind of improvement to your home, or perhaps the desire to move. You can gain extra thrust to achieve it with Mars's help. Also, if you are very close to your family, it may be a time when there's going to be much more connection to them. But just be aware that Mars in house 4 can be defensive. It's also squaring up to Pluto in your own sign. What Pluto's been asking you to do for those 11 weeks last year and from the 21st of January this year is to stay true to your individual needs, because perhaps there has been part of you that has been in some ways hiding what makes you unique and different, because it's too much of a chore to try to march in that energy all the time when people don't always get it. But I feel that this is an opportunity for you to really stand firm. So if any incoming comes around your emotional world, I think you're going to be very single-minded about pushing back against it. But there could still be some exciting changes around the middle of July, or it could be that you're going to reset your home world in some kind of novel, fresh or interesting way, which really works for you. And maybe it could be working from home or working in your local community, but offering a service that's very, very different to what anyone else is offering, because of course of the energy of Uranus. But you certainly are going to defend yourself strongly over the next 6 weeks for sure, around any personal stuff or any emotional stuff or anything to do with your family politics. So Pisces, Mars moving into house 3, really exciting. The pace of life is going to be picking up for you. Now I know there's that collective in house 4, very much about how you're feeling about things, your environment, your home, and obviously Saturn and Neptune in your sign are going to have a huge impact on those emotional needs in the first week of Mars's journey through the sign of Taurus, because they are clashing in very difficult right angles, to be honest. So this week ahead won't necessarily be that easy. And it's also possible that Mars colliding with Pluto across the 12th house for Pluto and the 3rd for Mars could see something very, very delicate come into the open in a way that could be quite tricky and quite painful to deal with. But you know, once Mars starts to pick up pace, you're going to love it. You're going to feel much more active. If you are someone who tends to be a little bit sedentary in your life, as many of us are these days, a great time to get out and about and do short but explosive exercise. So whether it is on a bike, whether it is a short run, whether it is walking very brusquely, or perhaps go into the pool, those kind of very cardio exercises will be really very, very good for you. And then around about the 11th to the 20th, whatever's going on in your situation, it's going to go on at a real rate. So things are going to go, like they used to say when I was a kid, like the clappers. So it's really going to go very, very quickly, and it's going to be perhaps a little unpredictable, but it will be truly exciting. So there could be a surprise invitation to go on a journey. Maybe you're going to embrace some technology in a way which you find very stimulating. If you are someone who works in the media or technology, that can be an area that you can really shine in. Perhaps it could be a new job that comes out of absolutely nowhere. But this initial phase of Mars moving into Taurus could bring something up very delicate in a week when things may feel quite tender, but just give it a little bit of time and Mars is going to be a very exciting support for you over these next 6 weeks. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great next 6-week period with Mars in Taurus. For now, take care, all the best, but please sub if you've yet to do so.